Hi, everybody. Welcome to YA OK. I am Erik J. Brown, and I am here with my beautiful co-host.
Oh, thank you so much. This is Alyssa Loop. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to YA OK. I'm so excited. This is our first episode. How would we know you, Erik? How would people know you, infamous Erik Brown?
I am the author of All That's Left in the World and Lose You to Find Me, and the sequel to All That's Left in the World, which is coming out in May, called The Only Light Left Burning. If you did not know, Lose You to Find Me is a USA Today bestseller.
Woo!
So I think that's pretty great.
It is.
And also, I just want to say, I know that we shouldn't take too long with our intros, but USA Today is pretty impressive just because New York Times bestseller is like, it's a little more curated. With USA Today, it is every single book, all age categories, adult, children's, picture book, hardcover, paperback, all of that is all in one list. So it's impressive. So I am an impressive individual. And that is why I am now a co-host of a gorgeous podcast like YA OK.
Yes.
Alyssa, how about you?
You might know me from Netflix's The Circle, where I held a vulva pillow in public. My dad loved it. His exact words when he saw that intro were, "Nice." I also now have all of my social media stuff all under Alyssa Lube, and I talk about sex education and other just fun everyday things. I have a podcast called Alyssa Explains It All. You can actually listen to Erik on the pod talk more about his books.
It's the beginning of our beautiful relationship.
I know. And now we're back. We're better than ever because we're together to talk about reading.
Yes.
Which I'm excited about. This is especially exciting for me because I don't have that many friends in real life that read as much as I do. And like, I don't read any like crazy amount, although I have read 3 books this year already, and it's only January 17th that we're recording this. I'm very impressed with myself.
I'm a slow reader. I've read 1.
But still, 1 is still, like, if you read, that means you read 1 book in like 2.5 weeks, which is still pretty good.
Well, I did start it back in December.
Okay. So maybe you are slow.
But the holidays got in the way.
The holidays are hard. But this episode is coming out for Valentine's Day. And I'm so excited for that because, like, the best part of, like, when it's wintry and cold and yuck is that you can stay inside. And Valentine's Day is still yuck season.
Mm-hmm. And we have Brian D. Kennedy, who is the award-winning author of adorable YA rom-coms, A Little Bit Country, and his new book, My Fair Brady, which just came out. So I think they're both little nice, warm, cozy books to cuddle up with on a snowy February day.
Yes.
And whether you have a loved one to spend the day with or not.
If your loved one really loves you, they'll leave you alone so you can read.
Yeah,
that's what
drink some wine and just read a book. Unless you're a teen who is reading this, don't drink wine.
Well, I don't know what these kids' days are like. I don't know.
And then here is where we put the legal thing that says that children should not be drinking wine.
You know, yes, and also in Europe, it's like fine.
Yeah, they do.
This is the craziest intro to a podcast episode.
I feel like it's gone off the rails.
It's really gone off the rails. We stayed like very on topic for the actual episode and for interviewing Brian for the most part.
Yeah, this is how first episode should be, though.
I think so. Chaos.
Yeah.
I think that Erik, from a lot of the ways that you describe your work process, you bring a little je ne sais quoi, a little chaos to everything. You know, like a little sprinkle of chaos.
Chaos is my brand.
Yeah, and I feel like you bring that out in me too in the best way possible.
Good. That just means that this podcast is going to be even better.
That's what I'm saying. Woo! Okay, well, enjoy the interview with Brian. That was psychotic.
You are my universe. You are my universe, and I'm just a planet.
I just did wallpaper in my room, and I feel like that like changed the whole vibe of my entire bedroom. Not this one, obviously.
Yeah, we were lazy. We just did one wall. It's an accent wall.
I did one wall also because it was me and my mom putting it up, and I don't think that we would have survived more than one. Like, it would have just been terrible.
Wallpaper's a pain. I wouldn't even put up wallpaper by myself.
The one that I got was peel and stick. You know, it was supposed to be like easier, I guess. And then in my head, I was like, oh, okay, like that should be easier because it's one like big sticker basically. And then I realized like that actually is horrible. One big sticker is horrible.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us on the
This is
pod. As
very
our first
exciting.
guest, too.
I'm so honored to be the first.
I'm so happy you're here. I went on your website. You have like one of the best websites, like best designed websites I've ever seen. Like it's so cute.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I just realized that like what I was doing on the table was definitely loud. Apologies. The Dolly Parton little drawing, the little like what are the, like paper doll. It just looks so great.
Yeah, the designer, I'll give them a shout out, is Danica Corral. She did a great job.
My website comparatively is just terrible. Just to like, it's a bunch of stuff on Canva that I just threw together. I'm like hoping it just looks fine.
Canva is my lifeblood. I feel like I make my entire everything on Canva, and both of your websites are infinitely better than mine that doesn't exist. So.
Alyssa has hosted podcasts before. I have never hosted one.
Yes.
So this is new. I've always just been a guest. So.
Well, and this will be a good first one for you to host because you two are friends. Like, you know, and I have only had one real conversation with Erik. And
I wouldn't call us friends. I think, Brian, we're frenemies.
Frenemies,
We
yeah.
hate each other.
Have I walked into drama?
Well, that would be fun what if everybody we brought on the podcast I just had beef with, like
We could
every
start
single person.
beef.
Yeah.
I think that could be a fun flair to the whole thing. We're going to talk about books, and then we're going to start drama at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you guys know each other?
We actually have the same editor. We met because we were in our debut group. Both of our debut novels came out in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out that Brian was with the same, not just the same imprint and same publisher as me, but the same editor as well.
What's an
I'm not sure if
imprint?
I reached out to you or if it was the other way.
I remember reaching out to you because then I remember I spelled your name with Erik with a C, and then I was like, oh man,
that's why I
I'm not
hate
starting
you.
out
That's
right here.
The beef just came so naturally.
And imprints are, so there's like our publisher is HarperCollins, and then within HarperCollins there's imprints. So like, I'm trying to think. So it's kind of like Universal Studios is the studio, and then Blumhouse would be like the producer. That would be, it's kind of like that. So Balzer and Bray is our imprint. We deal with the editors at Balzer and Bray, and then basically they have full autonomy to do, like, to help us create the book that we want to create. And then whoever's like head of HarperCollins is just like, okay, well, we trust you to buy that book. Sure, we'll distribute it for you.
Right. Okay, interesting. I'm learning so much about the bookmaking industry.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're all going to be here for, I feel.
I know. It's really exciting. So you have two books, Brian, A Little Bit Country and My Fair Brady. My Fair Brady, what a great title.
It'll be out by the time this airs, because I think this is going to be, this is our Valentine's Day episode, which is appropriate for a rom-com.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
Totally.
Do you want to talk about what the book is about?
Yeah, tell us about My Fair Brady first.
Yeah, so My Fair Brady is sort of my modern day, very gay take on My Fair Lady, which I also realized when I was pitching it is also, she's all that.
My Fair Lady is already gay?
Well, true. It's a
musical
theater, so not to play into stereotypes, but yeah, it's pretty gay. But yeah, it's basically She's All That, which I didn't realize She's All That was an updated version of My Fair Lady in a sense. So yeah, those are the two titles I usually compare it to. But it's about a very popular actor who, it's his senior year. He thinks he's going to get the starring role, and he doesn't. It goes to his ex-boyfriend who dumped him for being too self-involved. And then there's a very shy stagehand who joins the show as a sophomore, just wanting to make friends. Because he's very shy. And then sort of like in My Fair Lady, they sort of come to agreement if the popular actor Wade can help this shy stagehand Elijah become popular, Wade can look like a good guy to his ex-boyfriend, and Elijah can finally make some friends. And of course, along the way, it's a rom-com, so I'll let you deduce what happens between them.
Ooh, I love it. That sounds great.
I love the fact that it's just like unabashedly like theater nerd too.
Yes.
By the way, because I mean, were you a theater person? I feel like
I
you were,
was. I
Brian.
was a theater person in high school and college. Very,
Yeah.
very much a theater nerd.
High school and college. You were committed.
I was a theater major in college. Yeah.
Oh, so you were like, you were the most
Yeah.
committed.
Hardcore.
Wow.
Are there any real life stories from your time as a theater nerd that kind of made
Um,
it into this book?
I don't think so. I had to relearn a lot of like what actually goes into a show, especially on the technical end, which because I'm a horrible actor. I'm not very good at acting. So I was more into like playwriting and directing, but I did some acting and I did, technical stuff too. But I really had to like relearn like what the lights were called and
Mhm.
just everything that goes into a show. I don't think I stole anything specific. Well, actually there is one thing. So, and this is just like a very tiny subplot, but in the theater in my book, kids go up into the catwalks and spray paint their names onto the wall before they graduate,
Oh,
and that's
cute.
something we did at my high school. But we had to break in at night and like climb like 2 stories up. It was we could have like fallen and the school would have had a major lawsuit. But yeah, that was a real life thing that did make it into the book.
That's very cool. We definitely were not cool enough to do that in my theater program.
Yeah, us either. I don't even think our like after party was at my friend Brandon's house, and it was like I don't even know what it was. It was like a very one of those like tame parties too. Like his parents were home.
Oh yeah,
There was
Yeah.
only soda,
Yeah.
so it wasn't like this big after party kind of thing that would be in like a novel or movie. It was just like all of us sitting in Brandon's living room, pretty much.
See, mine, like, every now and then would get really unhinged, but I don't think anyone was drinking. I think it was just like they were all really horny, which feels like very theater kid coded. Like, what
yeah.
it's like the band kids and the theater kids. It's like, why are they also horny? I don't know, but they are. And it just felt like everyone was like making out at the end of it, aside from me. And I was like, I'm just gonna call my mom. I don't know what's going on anymore. Like, we just like finished, we wrapped Les Mis, and of course, we all have like stipple all over our faces to try and look dirty because I don't know why we were obsessed with that in high school. So it's just like stipple smudged on everyone's faces. Like, this is mortifying. I gotta go.
Yeah, I love you would have like at the cast parties, like the kids who had to play older characters still had like the gray
Yeah.
spray paint in their hair.
Exactly. Oh, those are good memories. I love all
Les
of
Mis
this
seems
stuff.
like it's like an intense play for a
It,
high school production.
Yeah,
Like,
I don't think we were ever that ambitious at my school.
it was, we actually, I think that year, it was my freshman year, and the seniors that year were really good. And so that's why they chose to do Les Mis, because and like a bunch of them went on to be like classically trained in opera and like all this other stuff. So like that particular year, we had really great, I know, it was very bougie. And we had really great seniors that year. And so I think that's why they were a little ambitious, but it also is the kind of show where like a whole bunch of the freshman ensemble are like prostitute 1, prostitute 2, prostitute 3. And I'm like, how am I supposed to tell my mom I got a part and it's prostitute 3? Like, it's horrible.
That reminds me, my best role. I mean, like I said, I was not a great actor, so I was usually just in the ensemble. But when we did The Sound of Music, the way the male ensemble appeared in the program was party guest / Nazi.
Oh no! Oh god,
I do
that's
feel like
rough.
being stuck playing a Nazi in The Sound of Music is pretty. I feel like that's pretty rough now. It's like,
Yeah,
maybe
I didn't
shouldn't
have
do
any
this.
lines. I just remember the big scene for the Nazis was we got to run through the auditorium with flashlights, just ad-libbing like, "Where are the Von Trapps? Have you seen the Von Trapps? They've escaped."
Oh my goodness. What play are they doing in My Fair Brady? Did you say? I don't know if I missed it.
No, I didn't say so. They're doing My Fair Lady, so it's very meta.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so they're sort of like the popular actors, familiar with the play. The stagehand isn't really a theater kid, so he's not familiar with it. So when he sort of brings up this agreement, the actor's like, "Wait, you basically want to do what the show is about? Like, you want me to be the Henry Higgins to your Eliza Doolittle?" And the kid's like, "Yeah, sure."
That's so cute.
I
love
forget.
that.
Does Wade even? Wade is the main character's name, who's the actor, and then
Yeah.
Elijah is the tech kid. Does Wade even point out the comparison between Eliza and Elijah? I always forget if that happens.
He never does. Yeah, that's the one thing that never gets mentioned. That it's like.
I think that's
Obviously,
appropriate because
me
it's
as
like
the
it's
author,
very
yeah.
close to it. It's like, yeah, you have to do that though.
I love that. I feel like that's one of those books where someone in a high school somewhere is going to get that as like assigned reading because they're doing My Fair Lady that year, and they want to teach the story in a way that like that is relatable, and that's going to be their assigned reading, and everyone's going to be thrilled about it. This is a dream that I'm having in my head for you. I
I hope
think
that
it would
does
be fun.
happen.
Yeah,
I know.
I
I
love
think
that.
that would be really fun. So, what is the process of like? I mean, this is really kind of a question for both of you guys. What is the process of writing a book like that? Like, do you do like what? Like, I think of the way that I write an essay, and if I'm writing an essay, I'm doing like an outline first, and then I'm filling it in as I go. But I don't really know that that's realistic for writing.
Go ahead, Brian, because I have a follow-up question for this
Yeah,
for you too.
I'm sure, it differs for every person. For me, I definitely need like an outline. I need, some parameters to sort of know where the story is going. I tend to be very detailed. So even like this book, like I knew I wanted to do a theater book. That sort of was just like the idea I had to start with because I know a lot about theater and I thought I would enjoy it. But then like before I could even think about what the story was, I had to decide what show they were going to do. And I wanted whatever show they did to somehow tie into the plot of the story. So it wasn't until I finally landed on My Fair Lady that I was like, okay, now I know where this book is going because I know what the main plot's going to be. And then, yeah, I usually write like a really detailed outline that could be, 7 to 10 pages, single spaced. And then, at this point, I wrote this book on contract. So I already had my editor. So, she had some input to my outline and where we wanted the story to go. But even then, once you sit down to like start writing it,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things change. Like from the very first draft to the final product, there were like, chapters thrown out, new chapters written. So it's very malleable along the way. But again, I usually know like where I want to start and where I want to end. And then how I get there is usually a very long, frustrating process. But it works out in
Yeah,
the end.
yeah.
I'm completely the opposite. I don't
I know you
outline
are. Yeah.
I'm the nightmare, and I think even my editor
Chaos.
thinks I'm the nightmare as well. So my first book, All That's Left in the World, is getting a sequel. It's coming out in May of this year.
Oh no
Um,
way.
I rewrote that book twice from scratch, pretty much, and They asked for an outline first, and I submitted an outline. They made me rewrite it 4 times, and then after I wrote the first draft, it changed. Like one thing changed, and it kind of spiraled out of control, and the entire last 3/4 of the book was completely different from the outline I turned in. And they were like, yeah, you need to rework this a little bit. So for me, writing is just chaotic. Even now, I'm trying to get them to approve my 4th book, and I had to write out an outline just to explain it to them. And this one's a thriller, so I was like, I have to outline it. And I gave them a chapter by chapter breakdown. I think it was like 12 pages long. And even that now still is not going to be what I write, because we had a call earlier today and talked some things out, and it's completely changed already. So I think from beginning to end for me, it's just a struggle and it's chaos. So I prefer Brian's way of doing it,
Yeah,
but
Brian,
it just
your
doesn't
way
work for
seems
me.
Brian, your method sounds so peaceful in comparison.
Well, but I also think, I mean, just from knowing Erik as a friend, I think our writing styles, maybe the end product is somewhat similar. I don't, we obviously have our own voices, but I think there's some similarities in our style. But yeah, how we get there is always different. And I think the downside to mine, to being like so planned and so plotted out, is then I have a very hard time deviating from that. And like to my own detriment, I'm a perfectionist. So like it will take me like a week to write a chapter, if not longer. And I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, Erik, but I feel like you can bang out a chapter in like a day if you need to.
Oh, I can bang out like 3 or 4
Yeah,
chapters a day.
exactly. So Erik's very like free and like doesn't
Wow.
get caught up in that, in that kind of thing. And I do. So there's good and bad to both ways of doing it,
Yeah, yeah.
I think my
Brian,
record for writing is, I think I wrote 12,000 words in one day once,
I am
which
hanging up now.
that's wild.
that's, for me, that's probably about 6 chapters. And that I will say, that was me in like a hyper focused state where I forgot to eat lunch, and I just
Right.
knew where everything was going. And it was like one of those moments where it was like weeks of maybe like 200 words a day, struggling to get to like this one point, like logically. And then once I got to that point, I was like, okay, now I have all of this set up and I can go off and do this. And I know it's where everything is going.
I feel
So
like
that only happens every once in a while. And when it does, I'm like, yes, and I can't leave my computer because I'm worried it'll like break the magic.
that's like what reading is like though, because sometimes like I'm struggling for like a couple of whatever, I don't know, 20 pages, and I'm like, oh my god, I love this book, and I'm reading the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and the second and third of those books are like 600-700 page long books, and
Yeah,
that's
I was
like
gonna say they're all pretty dense.
that's very long. And so as I'm getting through them, I love them, but there are parts where I'm like, how long does she need to be in this forest for it to be a plot line? I don't know why we need to do this for 100 pages. But then we get to that one part and like we're off to the races, and I'm like, and I'm up till 1 a.m. because I need to finish it. So I imagine that's a similar vibe.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how you can tell when, I think for me, there's always scenes that exist in your head and you're kind of writing towards. And I think those are the scenes that always just work perfectly. Were there any for you, Brian, in either A Little Bit Country or My Fair Brady? Because I actually do want to touch on A Little Bit Country too.
Yeah, there's usually scenes that I'm looking forward to writing because I have been thinking about them for a while, and they sort of seem like pivotal scenes. So like in My Fair Brady, at one point earlier in the book, because Elijah is unfamiliar with the show, Wade invites him over to watch the movie. And that was a scene that I just knew, like, so many things that could happen in there. And also for me, so I, like I said, I have a theater background. So in playwriting is all dialogue based. So for me, like writing dialogue is super easy. Anytime I have to do description, like describe where they are, talk about the house or the room, like, oh God, that, it can take me like all day to write two paragraphs about the house. But once we get into dialogue, it comes out a lot faster.
Yeah. I like the, and for me, it's always action scenes. I feel like for you, it's the romance scenes, because that scene was really adorable when they're sitting there watching on Wade's laptop. But for me, it's always the action scenes too, and I always get compliments on those scenes too. And I'm like, okay, so you felt like that immediacy and that energy that I was working towards. I feel like that like makes that a good payoff.
So that feels like the way that you would be writing it, and it's like kind of flowing for you too, is the way that the reader ends up reading it too. Like I would imagine that it's a similar experience in the way that it's being created and the way it's being received, which is really interesting. Actually, I guess kind of makes sense. We can feel the emotion through the page, and it's beautiful, and that's why we love reading.
And
thank you for coming to my TED Talk about why we like to read.
Brian, I want you to kind of tell us about A Little Bit Country too, for anybody that might be listening that doesn't know about your debut novel.
Sure.
Your award-winning debut novel.
Award-winning. A Little Bit Country. So, if My Fair Brady is all about how much I love theater, A Little Bit Country is how much I love country music. It's very Dolly Parton coded, Dollywood coded. It's about...
By coded, you mean any day now, you could get a cease and desist from Dolly Parton people.
Pretty much. I always say, like, so the Dolly character is named Wanda Jean. And they're like, is it modeled after Dolly Parton? I'm like, yes, if Dolly Parton had orange hair so I can't get sued.
Yeah. Love it.
But the story is about a gay kid from the Midwest who wants to be like the biggest, gayest country superstar. And he gets a job working at an amusement park of his idol in Tennessee for the summer. And there he meets Luke, a local boy who is not out yet, and he hates country music because he thinks his grandmother was a country singer, and he thinks it ruined his family and his grandma's life. So, of course, they meet at the theme park where they both end up working. And again, being a rom-com, I'll let you sort of guess where things end up for them.
So cute. I love
adorable.
it. That's a great concept.
Do you like to laugh, geek out on music, and learn all about that band or artist who had that one song back in the day, but then seemed to fall off the face of the earth? If so, you need to subscribe to One Hit Thunder. Together with an array of interesting and hilarious guests, we do a weekly dive into one-hit wonders like Eiffel 65's Blue, Krayshawn's Gucci Gucci, EMF's Unbelievable, Delamitri's Roll to Me, Los Del Rio's Macarena, Musical Youth's Pass the Dutchie, and even Patrick Swayze's She's Like the Wind. So are you subscribed to One Hit Thunder or what? As Desiree would say, you gotta be. And as K7 would encourage, you gotta come, baby, come and join in on the fun of the One Hit Thunder podcast.
Come, baby, come, baby, baby, come, come. Come, baby, come, baby, baby, come.
So I want to know if there's anything that you learned about your own writing process between A Little Bit Country and My Fair Brady, for better or worse, because I feel like it could go either way.
Yeah, oh, that's a good question. I mean, I will say writing My Fair Brady was so much harder, or at least it seemed that way. I don't know, maybe it's just was my perception, because this was my first time writing on deadline. So A Little Bit Country, I could just sort of write at my own pace, and I didn't have a goal of when it would be done or what that would look like. And then with My Fair Brady, I was under contract, and luckily, our editor and our imprint, I think they're pretty lenient. They weren't ever rushing me to like have it done by a certain date. So that was great. But yeah, I mean, writing A Little Bit Country, you kind of go into it blind a little bit. I'd taken writing workshops and classes, and I had an agent, and I worked on editorial notes with her. But once you actually publish a book, you just learn so much about the writing process that that you didn't know when you wrote that first manuscript or that first book. So I feel like this time I was writing a little more with a more critical eye, which probably didn't help me at times because it really let me get in my own way. And again, being a perfectionist. But writing it, I could be like, oh, our editor, so her name is Kristen, be like, Kristen's going to be asking me this at this point. She's going to want to know what they sound like. She's going to want to know what this is, what that is, the pace here. So yeah, you kind of, for me at least, I just was trying to incorporate all this new information that I had learned from my first book. And I think it slowed me down on getting that first draft out, because I have a hard time writing, like, you're supposed to just write the worst, the shittiest first draft you can.
Right.
Which is always hard for me. So
yeah, that makes sense. It kind of like once you know all of the like devil in the details, writing that would, I feel like I would be like that too, where it would drive me nuts and I'd be like, oh my God, I just know how this is going to go and I don't want to. Yeah, that would stress me out. I also am loving how you have to hold the headphones because it's giving like pop star vibes.
I know. I mean, no one can see me, but yeah, my earphones keep popping out. So I just have my ears up to them now. I'm like Secret Service.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say, I had that same thing where after doing so many drafts with your editor, you kind of anticipate what they're going to ask when you are drafting. I think, like, at some points, I do think it actually helps me a lot because I can remember, like, what her most common request would be. So, like, for my books, it's always like, oh, well, what is this character feeling right now? Can we get, like, more into the internal stuff? Because I'm focusing a lot more on how they look or how they sound or their environment. Mm-hmm. And she's like, okay, now go kind of internally. So I've kind of figured out how to anticipate that and put it in, so I'm not getting it as much anymore, which is exciting.
Good for you.
Now it's just gone on to other things, which paralyze me with fear and I don't know how to fix. It's exciting stuff.
I'm thinking about, like, I got like lost in thought for a second, thinking about when you're writing and considering how someone is feeling or like an action that they're taking and what the reason is that they're doing that. I feel like that would send me for like a psychological loop. I would just start over analyzing everything that I'm doing and the reason that I'm doing it. And it would end up being like, I feel like I would end up creating a journal out of a character I'm developing, because I would be like, yeah, and he just pushed the table over, and maybe that actually, if I'm thinking about why they would have done that, maybe it's some unresolved stuff, and maybe some defensiveness that they would have experienced with their father, but I'm not sure about. It would spiral me a little bit. Do you feel like your personal experiences, like in that way, like, do you have almost like moments of, oh, I think this is a little more autobiographical than I was anticipating it being?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything too autobiographical in my novels, but in every character I create, there's going to be like a little bit of me, whether it's conscious or subconscious. But it has been interesting because sometimes you'll think like, well, okay, I know this character isn't the same as me, but like, what would I do in this situation? And sometimes that can sort of guide you. And sometimes, like, if I'm writing a chapter or even an outline, and then I get feedback from my agent or editor where they're like, oh, this is bad for that character to do this. I'm like, oh, okay. Just kidding. That's not something I would have done.
Yeah, exactly. That would wreck me. Like, that's exactly the situation that I'm thinking of. It's like, what would I would do if I were in that situation? And that would give me like, that's too much.
They're like, oh, isn't this kind of creepy? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it is.
No, you're right. Yeah, I thought that when I was writing
Who
it.
would do such a thing? Clearly
Yeah,
not me.
Then you go to your therapist, you're like, yo, so
Yeah.
here's what's going on.
That's a text. That's a text you send them before you even have your session that week. You're like, we gotta circle back on this. Has it
Yeah, I was
happened to
gonna
you,
say
Eric?
I pull everything from my life and I put it into books. I'm worried that like if I write too quickly and too much that I'm gonna end up using
Your name.
everything and then it'll just be like, well, have I already said this? I've already had to like go through past manuscripts and just look up certain words to make sure I'm not repeating myself.
That's so
And like, because
funny.
especially if it's okay if it's like a sequel and I'm repeating things and it's the same character, but if it's a completely different story and I am telling the same story that I pulled from my life
Mhm.
and just kind of like changing a couple things. I just don't want all of a sudden if somebody happens to read those two books back to back and somehow have a perfect memory of them. Like anytime I read a book, I forget pretty much the entire book as soon
Yeah.
as I'm done reading it.
Same.
But then there's people who ask me questions sometimes about my own books that I've read like 9, 10 more times than I can count. And they're like, oh, well, this person says this. What do they mean by that? And I was just like, I don't remember that even happening. So I'm always nervous I'm going to repeat myself.
That's when you have to flip the script, do one of these. What do you think that they could mean by that? I would love to hear your interpretation. Just gaslight them.
Matt, cut this later. That's my new secret.
Erik, I want to know, have you ever repeated a character name unknowingly, like used a same character name in 2 different books?
Yes. I did I believe I put a character in The Only Light Left Burning who had the same character as somebody from Lose You to Find Me, and I didn't realize it.
Oh.
And then there's also a character in All That's Left in the World that was just a random like character that's only mentioned by name. And then I used his name is the main character of Lose You to Find Me, and I didn't realize it until last night, actually. Because I was like thinking about something and I was like, oh wait, I did use. I mean, it's an obvious like it's a very common name. It's Tommy, so it's like
Right.
doesn't really
so
matter. But I was just
funny.
thinking about it randomly last night, and I was like, oh, I totally forgot that there's a character named Tommy in All That's Left in the World that's dead, and then there's a main character from Lose You to Find Me. Thankfully, they're different worlds, so they don't have to worry about that.
That's fine. And there's more than one Tommy in every world, I feel.
Exactly.
True.
I should just put a Tommy in every single one of my books.
I
and
would
then at
love
the same
that.
time, it wasn't that I didn't remember, but I didn't think about the fact that I have an uncle named Tommy too.
So you killed him in the first one and then you made him
I know,
a
right?
star in the second.
He like when he found out, he's like, oh, the main character's named Tommy. I was just like,
oh
yeah.
It would
that's
appear that way.
And technically my cousin, because my cousin's named after him as well. So
Wow. Brian, have you done that? Have you repeated any character names?
Not yet that I know of, but now that I'm like drafting what I hope is going to be my 3rd book, I'm very worried about that because the more books I write, the more I forget the earlier ones. So I feel like when I was promoting a little bit country, I had a pretty firm grasp on like everything that happened, everyone that is in there. But now that I'm on my 2nd book, that 1st book is like out of my brain. So who knows what will happen.
I'm going to put a Wanda Jean in my 4th book.
Wanda Jean! Bring back Wanda Jean. I would love if your cinematic universes like converged somehow, that like Erik, at some point in a book, you have a character who has a poster of Wanda Jean somewhere in their room,
Maybe
their
I
favorite
should.
country artist. I would love that.
Yeah, well, I can't remember if I ever told Erik this, but I thought a great idea. I mean, not really. I wouldn't impose this on you, but in your All the Light Left Burning, if you needed like an abandoned amusement park for them to go through Wanda World.
Yeah.
They do go through an abandoned amusement park, and I did not do that because I didn't want to kill Wanda Jean.
Thank you.
Oh, that's nice.
Because it was, and I didn't know how to like get them over to Tennessee because they're in South Carolina, which is close,
Yeah.
but the theme park is in South Carolina, and then I was concerned about like it taking out the fact that Dolly doesn't exist in this world too, because there's already Dolly Parton references in the first one and in the second one too. So I had already thought about
Oh,
that, and I was like, there's too many converging things happening for it to work properly. So I'm
How,
saving that for the next one.
how do you have so many Dolly Parton references?
Because we're gay. There are Dolly Parton
Yes.
references in wait, is there Dolly Parton references in My Fair Brady, or are
No.
there Wanda Jean references?
No, I'm not one of those authors. Some authors really like to lay little like Easter eggs. That's, I don't
I like to
know.
do that.
To me, that's not my style. But I appreciate other authors. As a reader, I like it when other authors do it.
Yeah.
You should
Yeah.
start doing it. I
I
think
think
it's
that's
great.
fun. That's so fun.
Brian, what drew you to writing YA specifically?
I've told this story before, so apologies to anyone who's heard it. But I was, I've always been a writer, and it wasn't really until like my 30s that I thought, oh, I could actually write like publishing is something I could actually pursue seriously if I wanted to. So I signed up for some writing classes and writing workshops, and I was actually in a nonfiction essay class. I wrote an essay about like when I came out after college or something, and it felt to me it was like very personal. We shared them in the class, and our teacher, she was this like very downtown New York writer. She dressed like all in black, had long black hair. She always talked about how much she missed smoking. And like I knew, my little like gay coming out story. I knew, a lot of people be like, oh, well, this is a little trite, and like, oh, it's we've evolved since then. But like I said, to me, it felt very fresh still. And she wasn't like super mean about it, but she was like, oh, there's no blood in here. Like, where's the blood in this story? And not physical, but like actual
I was gonna
literal
say,
blood. Yeah.
damn.
Or like the beating heart of it. And she's like, it
Sure.
just reads like really good YA. And she said really good, but I could tell she
Really
like did
good.
not mean that in a compliment, as a compliment. But at that point, I hadn't really read any current YA because when I was a teen, there wasn't much of a YA genre or a lot of books geared towards teens. So it prompted me to like pick up my first young adult book. And once I read it, I was like, oh, actually, like this does sort of sound like my writing voice, the way these people write. And I think this actually would be a good fit for me. So long story short, I decided to try writing YA thanks to that teacher who actually did end up helping me, even though she was a little bit rude about it.
That's
Do you
so
remember what the
funny.
YA book was that you read?
Eleanor and Park, which
Okay.
now upon reflection is a little problematic, but at the time,
That's okay. I mean, what is it from
true.
even 15 years ago?
What is that book and why is it problematic now?
Is it a rom-com? I don't think it would have been classified as rom-com. It's a contemporary, but it's written by a white woman, and one of the characters is Asian, and the representation is lacking a little bit there. So
Got it. Okay. I feel like YA is having more of a moment now than it has in a really long time, and I think because in general people are getting more like people are getting back into reading in a way that, and it could just be that maybe I've just kind of exposed myself to this whole side of like book talk and bookstagram, and everyone's like so invested in reading now in a way that I just was not. I remember maybe 10 years ago, I feel like Barnes and Noble was closing like crazy. It was getting, it was like really sad actually to watch because I used to hang out in Barnes and Noble. Like that was like in high school, I would just sit in Barnes and Noble and just like browse through books for hours. And now I feel like they're starting to come back. Like local bookstores are popping up in my very small town. And I feel like people are starting to understand how much we really do need to be able to like read fun books. And YA is nice because you know that you're going to get like a nice ending at the end of it. It's not going to be like a book where you're going to be like trying to look up every single word on every single page. Like you'll actually be able to enjoy the story as you get through it. And I don't know, it's just like, so it's such a nice way to enjoy a story without having your eyeballs on a screen. And I think people are really appreciating that now.
Somebody said on Twitter, I haven't been on Twitter for a few months, and one of my friends said that there was somebody who said on Twitter that this woman was like upset that her daughter had aged out of YA as like a, I think 14-year-old or something. And I like, to me that was strange because number one, you're not aged out at 14,
Yeah.
like that's prime YA. But I think what she meant was she wanted more middle grade stuff, so like less romance. And I was like, okay, that's that's great, but then I try to pitch something that does not have romance, and YA editors don't want to buy that because
Mm.
YA has so much crossover, more crossover to adult than it does for teens, because anybody who is younger will read up to the older YA, and then anybody who, like, YA is pretty much made for, if they're not seeking out this very specific story, they don't usually buy that book. It's always the adults and the older teens
Hmm.
and like maybe people in their 20s and 30s that are actually like, okay, well, I'm going to read this because it's still relevant to me. I still like this kind of these stories with romance and excitement. And also I want to read something that's like more fun and isn't just this, like, kind of like you were saying, Elizabeth, like it's the hard literature where it's either very dark or it's overwhelming, or there's like pages upon pages upon pages of descriptions before you
Mm.
even get to like any kind of emotional moment, and then it's pages of emotional moment and no dialogue kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like there is definitely a market for that, but in order for there to be a market for that, I think that's a whole other can of worms that we probably don't get into, honestly.
It's so weird to think of a 14-year-old aging out of YA because I'm 30 and I read YA.
And it was just because the 14-year-old didn't want to read a romance.
Yeah,
Like, she
yeah.
was looking for more like friends who are going through an
Sure.
adventure, which is like, yeah, I want to write that.
Yeah.
But there's people are less willing to buy that. It's like, I feel like there needs to be that it has to be something like a series that starts
Mm.
as a middle grade, and then eventually it can grow along with the characters for
Yeah.
the readers.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I had a friend recently, actually literally last night, he decided a while ago he wanted to write this children's book because he just like had this idea for it. He actually got it together. He had someone illustrate it, the whole thing, and he sent it yesterday. And my mom works with kindergartners. And so when we got it, he was like, "Do me a favor, show it to your mom." And it was really cute, but it was like very crowded. Like there was a lot of images and a lot of text, and there were words that like a kid wouldn't necessarily, like, depending on the age, would might be challenging for a child. So we were like, what age are you trying to, well, who is this for exactly? And he was like, I don't really know. And I was like, that's interesting, because I never thought, like, when you guys were writing, did you have an age in mind before you started?
Yeah, I mean, I think for YA, the intended audience is always teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
probably specifically high school. But I think a lot
Okay.
of middle graders read up, and then obviously, like Erik said, there's crossover, so a lot of adults will still read YA. I mean, I obviously read plenty of YA, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the intention is always, at least on my end, and I know on my editor's end, the intention is always we're writing this for teens. So
Got
I
it.
don't want to, you know, and in my book, there's like plenty of swearing. There's underage drinking. There's sex. It's not that I filter it or can't push boundaries a little bit, but I do want it to be appropriate for like what kids are going through.
Mm-hmm.
um I'm not like sexualizing my characters in a way that's inappropriate, that you would in like an adult romance novel. So I think there are some sort of parameters that you have to adhere to when you're writing. I don't know, Erik, if you how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I think before you even start writing, you should understand the audience that you're going to be writing for.
Mm.
So, with not just age category, too, like age category is a good starting place because it's like, well, I'm writing YA, so I'm writing specifically with the audience of teens in mind. If there is crossover, great, but this is specifically for teens in this age group. Um, but I think on top of that, you also have to, like with My Fair Brady, you have to understand that people who pick this up are going to be into theater. I feel like there might be a couple people who are like, oh, well, no, I'm not like a theater person, but this sounds really cute. I'm going to read it. But I feel like for the most part, the eye-catching cover with them on a stage is going to immediately draw anybody who likes theater and go, oh, let me pick this up. Let me look at
Mm-hmm.
that. And at the same time, you have to have those like references in there. You have to have like theater references. You have to have, even though Elijah is a good basis for anybody who may not have that, they can be an audience surrogate. But I still feel like everybody, before you even start writing anything, you should know who your audience is and the audience you're writing for. And sometimes it's just you, but like specifically you as the age category you're writing.
Right.
Because I, with All That's Left in the World, that's who I was writing that for. It was me, because I was annoyed that there were no queer people in post-apocalyptic stories. So
You created the dream. You created the crossover that you always wanted. I love it. I love it.
So I think we'll start wrapping up. Alyssa, do you have any other questions?
I think the only other question that I can think of is one of the things that Erik and I talked about was some of the challenges that he had writing a queer romance, and like having a book be removed from a library, the drama, and how it didn't even, like, how the cover, I will never forget the cover having, you said, like, lesbian period drama tension of the pinkies like barely touching. And was that anything that came up for you at all? Or because I guess because you guys have the same editor and whatever, that helps too. But
Yeah, for me, I don't think there was anything specific that has come up, and a lot of that I credit to my editor and to our imprint, that they never push back on anything on the creative side, which is great. Like I said, there's sex in my book. In my book, it takes place off the page, but they still talk about it. That it's two boys thinking about their emotions and what losing their virginity would mean. So like, I never got one note of like, oh, is this too much? Or is this going to turn readers away? Or is this going to make, your book a target for a book ban? There was never any worry about that, which is really great. I think more generally speaking, and not maybe specifically to my experience, so, obviously queer books are being banned. And I also think just in publishing, they're sort of undervalued and usually not given as big as like a marketing push or publicity push because a perception that maybe queer books have a smaller audience. And, it's not just queer authors that go through this. Obviously, POC authors have to deal with this a lot as well, probably even worse. So I think sometimes publishers sort of limit themselves, being like, oh, we're, the easier books are the big straight white books, let's give them all our money. And then hopefully these other books will do okay. So I think that's one challenge we face, of like trying to get as much attention as other authors with perceived bigger audiences.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think if you like don't get those notes from your editor, you're doing it right too. Like, especially for those scenes, you're handling it appropriately. You're like, everything that you've kind of put on the page is working, and nobody is like raising any red flags and being like, oh, well, this is perfectly appropriate and acceptable and it should be talked about. Because even if there is no sex in there, there are still going to be people that try to ban your books anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like they don't care about any of the violence, any language. They just care about sex or the people that are in it, and that's all.
Fuck them.
Yeah. Brian, you know that this question is always going to come. So what are you reading and what are you looking forward to?
What I'm reading right now. So obviously I write young adult, but I read a lot of adult too. I'm reading Yellowface, and I feel like maybe I'm a little late to the party. I think it only came out last fall, but I feel like a lot of people have already read it. But
it was all the buzz.
I am loving it so much. It's very like inside publishing. I think even if you're not in publishing, you can enjoy it. But like for me, I'm just like savoring each page and cracking up and cringing, and it's just so funny. I can't get enough of it. I read like a couple pages before bed every night, and I'm trying to like pace it out. And then what I'm looking forward to, obviously, Erik J. Brown's next book, The Only Light Left Burning. As soon as I get caught up on the books I have to blurb, I am like breaking into Erik's computer and stealing a copy of it if he doesn't give it to me.
I mean, you could just email Kristen, our editor, and she's like, oh, here you go. We just got this back from copy editing.
My way is more fun.
It'll be completely cleared up of all of the issues that are going to be in the e-arc. So
he's a secret agent now. So
yeah, that's right.
Yes, exactly. Got it. So that's good.
I put a camera in your laptop there.
Perfect.
Well, Brian, thank you for being here for our first ever episode.
Whoa!
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, right?
Yeah.
Wild.
I mean,
we killed it, honestly. Yeah.
professionals, all of
I
us.
I
We're
think
great.
so. I think we did a great job. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it,
Yeah.
especially as we're like, this is our very first episode, and it was really fun. I liked learning about this whole process. I can't wait to learn more.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And A Little Bit Country is available in paperback wherever you buy books. My Fair Brady will also be available because it's Valentine's Day and it came out probably like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So go on, buy Brian's books, and support queer art.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. We did it.
When she asks me how far we can take it, I tell her we can take it across the entire universe. You are my universe, I'm just a planet.
Well, I think that was a great first episode. Thank you to Brian D. Kennedy for coming on and talking with us about his books. You can get My Fair Brady and A Little Bit Country wherever you buy books. And Alyssa, what are you reading right now?
I am reading A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the third in the Sarah J. Maas universe. I love it. What are you reading?
I am reading something called Dead Happy.
Oh,
It is by Josh Silver. I'm going to kind of pull my author card on this one because this has not come out in the US yet. It actually hasn't come out in the UK yet either, but
exclusive.
it is a sequel. It is. It is a sequel to Josh's first book, Happy Head, which is being turned into a film.
No way.
Taron Egerton is producing it.
When?
And it is this kind of dystopian adventure. It always starts like that, but like it's so much deeper than that. It's hard to explain it without getting into any spoilers. So look up Happy Head. It is coming out in the US this year.
Cool.
Dead Happy is the sequel. It's coming out in the UK this year and probably next year in the US. But it is a very exciting. I am so excited to read this.
Awesome. Okay. I love it. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on any podcasting app that you are using. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at YAOK Podcast. And message us with a little mini review of whatever you're currently reading. Maybe we will read your review in a later episode. Woo!
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.